Welcome back to the channel. Today we have yet another special guest. He comes to us from PRESEARCH. PRESEARCH is a community-powered decentralized search engine that provides better results while protecting your privacy and rewarding you when you search. His name is Colin Pape. Welcome, Colin.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Appreciate it.
You are the founder of PRESEARCH, and I just want to ask you right off the bat, what prompted you and your team to want to build a decentralized search engine in the first place?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was really just realizing how concentrated the search space was. 92% market share for Google, dominance really of the internet in many respects. And just, with that power comes the ability to, control what information people have access to. And I had a personal experience with my other company, shopcity.com. Google had basically assessed, for whatever reason, we still don't know, a manual penalty against most of our websites, and relegated them onto page 8 of Google. And so when you're on page 8 of Google, even when people are searching for your brand name, you realize just how much power Google has. And through that experience, we uncovered thousands and thousands of others that had been through something similar, were not able to get the resolution that we were through the media, and just thought, there needs to be a more community-driven search engine. And with the creation of Ethereum and blockchain, realized that a prototype that we had built in 2013, 2014 had now a viable go-to-market strategy where we could reward people for searching and enforce payment for the advertising platform in the same token, kind of completing the token ecosystem. So away we went and built PRESEARCH. It's coming up on 5 years now.
Oh, wow. Do you mind talking about Shop City? What did you originally, that background you came from originally that Google ultimately censored you for, essentially, and relegated you, page 8, forget about page 8, page 2, nobody looks past page 1, maybe even the first half of page 1 or the first 3, so what happened there, and what were you building there and why do you think they did that?
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, how much traffic goes to those first 3 links, and certainly to the first page of results, and just how influential that list is. And so shopcity.com, it's like a network of local marketplaces powered by local businesses, enabling communities to build a shop local campaign, basically. So shopmiami.com, we have shopnewyork.com. We bought like 20 years ago, like 8,000 of these domain names, and we built out a platform. Yeah, it's kind of like almost like a franchise model. So somebody local, they buy the rights to that community, and then we give them the online tools to build out a business directory and an e-commerce platform. And we had launched it in Silicon Valley. My business partner, Jim, he's from the San Francisco Bay Area. And we ended up hiring our first VP of sales. It happened to be in Mountain View. So he went into the Mountain View Chamber of Commerce and said, hey, shopmountainview.com. They're like, oh, wow, we're running a Shop Mountain View campaign. We would love to partner with you. So we partnered with them. And then the local newspaper came to write about it. And as that was happening, the publisher of the local newspaper said, oh, well, we're running a Shop Mountain View campaign as well. We want to buy the rights to the platform. And they had all the connections with the city government and everybody else. Of course, Mountain View is where Google's based. And so Google is a member of that Chamber of Commerce. And so, shopmountainview.com got up and running, as well as shoppaloalto.com, shopmenlopark.com. And kind of right after that happened, all of a sudden, Google launched this Get Your City Online campaign that was partnering with chambers of commerce to help onboard local businesses into the Google My Business platform. And then July 2011, all of a sudden, our sites almost unanimously go onto page 8 of Google. So we didn't know what happened. happened. We were wondering, we were trying to get a resolution, thought maybe it was a technical issue on our end. We
Oh
wanted to
no.
fix it. Couldn't end up getting any help at all. It was like, talking to a brick wall. And so I started getting desperate. We're like 2-3 weeks where our sites are on page 8 of Google. So I ended up seeing this article with this guy, Gary Reback, who was a lawyer, the guy who broke up Microsoft with Windows and Internet Explorer. He's known as the champion of the free marketplace. And he was involved in an FTC investigation into Google with their monopolistic practices. And so I just sent an email to him thinking, hopefully he'll reply to me. And who knows, he's, a $1,000 or $2,000 an hour lawyer in Menlo Park. I sent an email. 15 minutes later, he says, "Hey, when can you come out here and talk to me?" So I was already planning to go out there. So I set up a meeting with him. I started telling him the story of what happened to us. And what was really interesting is that we kind of had a control group because we had, 50 different sites on the platform. Not all of them had gone on to page 8. But all the ones in Silicon Valley that were running in Google's backyard were all of a sudden down. So he thought it was super interesting. He ended up getting us some press coverage. This article was the one that broke the story. It was in the San Jose Mercury News on the front page of the business section. And basically, we were able to create some competition between various media outlets to kind of break this story, and it forced Google to make a comment. I was interacting with the head of global PR for Google, a guy named Gabriel Stricker, and they ended up being quoted in that article as saying that they assessed us a manual penalty, which means a human went in and demoted our sites, and it was the first time that they had ever admitted that not everything was algorithmic. And so through that, they ended up building out the Google manual penalty assessment, portal within Google Search Console. And we ended up getting a contact at the highest level of Google, a guy named Matt Cutts. And we got our issue resolved, but realized that, man, this is a huge problem for many people, and they aren't as fortunate as us to have been working with like the city of Mountain View and all these credible partners that enabled the media to cover the story.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, first thing, going back to the beginning of your answer there and the story, you said that you bought domain names like 20 years ago in anticipation. You already had this vision of what the internet could do back then, because we're talking, early 2000s, people had a more than a good idea, but you're talking about post.com bubble then, if we're talking about like strictly on the years. And then
I got started as a web developer in like the late 90s as a teenager. Basically, I built a website I had started a car business that I was into, like Hondas and Acuras and stuff like that, and was importing auto parts. And so built a website for that. And then my parents had a small business. They had a paint store. So I built a website for their business. And then all these other local businesses started wanting websites. So I started building websites for them when I was like, 17, 18, 19. And then around, 2000, late 90s, 2000, like we're in a pretty small town. It's like 17,500 people. And it was all local businesses primarily. There were no big box stores. And all of a sudden, Walmart and Home Depot announced they were coming into Midland. And so all the local business owners, they were freaking out, like, oh, how are we going to compete against these guys? They kind of built like a whole new retail center, like away from all the other businesses. And so I just started thinking, man, we've got the internet now. This was like 2000, and literally like nobody had digital cameras even. I had like the first digital camera around here. And so I thought, we got to be able to use the internet to promote these local businesses and ensure that people know what their options are. And so I went out and started taking pictures of the businesses and scanning pictures and putting them online, and thought, need to build a business directory. And so the town that we're in is called Midland. So I bought shopmidland.com, and it was like a guerrilla marketing thing. My college roommate, Ryan, and we went out in the middle of the night on a Sunday, and we put up 150 of these 2 foot by 1 foot Coroplast signs that said shopmidland.com, support your community, on all the
Mm.
street posts all over town. So on Monday morning, people drove into work and they were like, what the hell is this? It was like everywhere. And all of a sudden people started talking about it. And we got invited to do a deputation to the town council, and the Chamber of Commerce got on board with it. And we were basically trying to just, bring awareness to local businesses, and it became successful. It started, with a subscription business model, basically. And I ended up, my now wife, my girlfriend at the time, her father was in the franchise industry, and he was like, man, this is like a great franchise concept, you should. So I started registering all these other domain names, and I ended up partnering with a guy, Jim, the guy in Silicon Valley, and he had already secured like most of the US. And so we ended up coming together under one company, and partnering to bring this platform that we had developed to all these different domain names.
That background adds a lot of weight to, in my opinion, to you wanting to go with your team and creating PRESEARCH, because it shows that you know what you're doing in terms of how to be one of the pioneers of a new technology and then pushing it into a traditional landscape, right? Online e-commerce, marketing online at one point, that was seen as a waste of time. Don't do that. You're going to lose your credit card identity. It'll be a scam.
Yeah.
People just functioned in a different way that is kind of, I've spoken about this in a few of my interviews. It's kind of crazy how quickly things change.
Yep.
Going back to PRESEARCH, you know, the battle to create the most attractive search engine, to draw users in from other competitors, is a fight as long as the internet itself. Well, the personal computer at least. Um, Trying to build a search engine on the blockchain, it seems like a shiny object, right? How can PRESEARCH actually compete with the traditional players in this ecosystem of search engines?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, obviously I've been around the internet for a long time. I've seen the shift from kind of like the open internet days, which was the early internet, where it felt like, oh, wow, everybody can, it's a level playing field here. Everybody has the same opportunity on the internet, to this kind of hyper centralized world we now live in, where it's Facebook that dominates social, and Twitter, and of course Facebook owns Instagram, and like there's this centralization, and then there's like ownership centralization that's even a level beyond that. I mean, the number two search engine, a lot of people don't realize it, is YouTube. Like kids these days, honestly, my kid doesn't say, oh, or any of his friends, they don't say, I Google it like some of the people in my generation say. They say search it up, because they search YouTube. That's where they find everything. They spend most of their lives on YouTube. They don't even look at regular search in a lot of cases. And so, like, there's this whole kind of like paradigm, I think, of search that is potentially changing. Search hasn't really changed a lot in the past 20 years. I was an original, promoter of Google before people even knew about Google. If you go to archive.org and you look up shopmidland.com and you go back to 2000, you can see the first version of Shop Midland had a Google search field at the top of it, and people would go on to Shop Midland and access Google through it. And they realized, like, oh crap, Google's amazing, but they didn't know that it was Google. They just started doing it through Shop Midland, and so that's how I ended up getting like tons of people in this area to set Shop Midland as their homepage. And so, like, I've kind of done this a few times. I started another thing called startster.com, which was a start page builder back in 2004, 2005. I ended up shutting it down because, again, go to market, like what your question of like, how do you go to market? It was it was tough. And honestly, I got spooked at the time because Google rolled out a thing called iGoogle, which was a start page builder. And it made me think, oh man, there's no way I can compete with this. And so I ended up shutting it down. Well, then Google shut down iGoogle like 2 or 3 years later and left that whole kind of start page opportunity. And so with Presearch is it's a search engine, but it's also a start page, and it's really kind of like a multi search engine, and not just in like a meta search kind of form, which is actually more what the current Presearch search engine has. But if you go into presearch.com, you'll see a search field, and it's kind of like a federated search field is the way that I think of it. So how I use Presearch personally, I have it set as my homepage. I use the app on my phone, and I have it configured to have icons for all the different resources that I search often, because I do general web searches, for the majority of things, but I also do Etherscan lookups all the time. I do domain name lookups all the time. I've got multiple CRMs that I search for different businesses and projects that I'm involved in. I've got all these different things that are basically, niche search engines. And so I use that search field. I type whatever I'm looking for, and then I hit the icon for wherever I want to direct the query. And then I get the results that I'm looking for in whatever platform I'm looking to search. And so otherwise, I got to bookmark each of these different things, wait for them to load, wait for their search fields to pop up. And honestly, it's like a 3-step process. And this way, it's a 1-step process. And so the initial version of Presearch, honestly, it was that multi-search UI. And the default search engine was Google. We were just searching Google. Literally, you would type your search field, you would hit search, and it would just kick you over to Google. But we were rewarding you with Presearch tokens in order to use our UI to do that, to start building, that habit, creating a very thin wedge in that user behavior, because Google has massive network effects. Very hard to displace somebody like Google that is embedded on all these devices, has literally become the verb for how we search. Like, this is a monumental freaking undertaking and challenge. It's not simple. And so, we thought the thinnest wedge we could drive was get people onto a different UI and then drive them over to Google. And then that would at least give us an audience where we could then start building our own search experience, which we ultimately need in order to display the ads, which kind of complete the other side of the token ecosystem. And so the first version, it was like, we were showing ads on the homepage where that search field was. And then we built another one that was using the Bing API, where we could now embed, the Presearch ads. But then, the unit economics of doing that, it's like, like $6 for every 1,000 searches. It was just like we were getting too much traction. It was becoming too expensive to do it. And so, the ultimate vision is Presearch has its own fully decentralized index. It uses the blockchain for coordinating resources, for data storage, for, quality signals and voting, and the ability for the community to impact what the search results are. But in the meantime, as a way to kind of get there, we're basically aggregating search results from multiple existing search engines. We have built out this node platform that has 70,000 user nodes. So when you run a query, it basically anonymizes that query. It passes it out to a user node. The user node goes out to all these existing search engines, databases, APIs, and then combines that result back into a Presearch result. And we have the ability to then put an ad on top of that. And so it's about making that search experience as good and as close as possible to the best search engines that exist, without having to undertake, it's like a multi-billion-dollar endeavor to build out a huge index that is fully long tail like what Google has. And so it's kind of like a step process. Ultimately, we're going to get there. First thing that we'll be doing is building an index of kind of the short tail search results, those million common queries that are run regularly. but it's that, how do you answer that query that nobody has ever run before, which is supposedly like, up to 5% of all Google queries have never been seen before. They're like random things that people come up with in all these different combinations. And how do you determine ranking and relevance of, this massively sprawling internet that has billions and billions of web pages?
Indexing is essentially everything you just mentioned. Is that safe to say for for those that don't know?
It is. So, we're basically like, so we built out now this infrastructure layer, which is the pre-search nodes. And so, rather than us, spinning up 70,000 servers or having this really deep footprint with one provider, which then puts, a huge target where, you could be shut off, right? Now we have 70,000 decentralized computers that we have access to that are being rewarded with pre-search tokens for handling tasks. So right now, the tasks that we're handing to them are aggregating search results and building that result list from existing resources. The next task that we're going to be sending to those nodes is crawling. And so that's basically giving them a URL and then having them go to that website and then look for all the other URLs that are within that website, and then basically sucking all that information that exists into like a data repository, where now we know, okay, here's all the content, and then we can start analyzing, hey, here are all the links that are inbound to all of these websites, and we can start to determine relevance and authority and begin actually ranking them. But that is kind of the next task that we'll be downloading onto the nodes over time. Our CTO, Trey Granger, is a search expert. He was SVP of engineering for a company called LucidWorks. They're the company that powers search for like Reddit and Walmart.com and Home Depot and all these really big data repositories. And he has really deep experience in open source search. And so ultimately, how does pre-search compete with these huge centralized search platforms, whether it's Google or DuckDuckGo, Bing, Brave, any of the others? Ultimately, it's by empowering the community to participate in this process and enabling hundreds or thousands of engineers to contribute in exchange for pre-search tokens, which they get as rewards for their contributions to making pre-search better. So that's kind of, where we're going.
Yeah. There's a lot there. So one thought out of the many I had there, it is a very ambitious task to try to make a decentralized search engine. There's plenty of them out there that, they have their user base, but there's nothing distinct about the way they function. And like you mentioned before, you touched on it briefly, the internet is ultimately supposed to be like this free and open thing. And there have been many attempts to control it from a base layer perspective. And at least in the US and in the Western world, that has ultimately failed. Even in authoritarian governments, there are always ways around it, right? It's almost like trying to ban Bitcoin mining. It's like, yeah, good luck with that in China. You'll still get the majority, but you won't get all. But then they develop kind of like a gateway around access to the internet, right? And even the majority of what people look for on the internet is just a surface layer, right? And then you go into the dark web and all that. But that centralization of the gateways is a really, really tough one to tackle. But I think with the advent of blockchain technology, it's finally possible to kind of bring this full circle where advertisers are able to use the same type of asset to display ads. Technically, what can make you an advertiser is just having enough of that asset in order to compete. How do you get rewarded for those assets? Well, you can launch a node, which ultimately will help to decentralize the network, but also just participate in the active usage of the search engine, or at least the gateway of that decentralized search engine to the centralized ones.
Mhm.
Um, that's really interesting. And I have one question out of that. When did mainnet launch for
So
pre-search?
that was on May 26th, so just 2, 3 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that it went from presearch .io to presearch.com, although both work.
Mhm.
What is the significance of, well, before I ask you the significance of mainnet launch, you said that your team has been working on presearch for several years.
Mhm.
What goes into developing this type of ambitious project that takes several years to actually get to mainnet launch?
Yeah, so I mean, going through just those different iterations, how do we find a community for one is kind of the first thing, because this is a community driven search engine, and really when we talk about, well, what is the difference between pre-search and any of these other search engines that exist, it really goes back to what is the genesis of those different ventures, and pretty much all of them except pre-search, they're like VC backed venture capitalists, and they kind of have their roots in the legacy system. And
Mm,
so ultimately their ability to challenge the legacy system is limited, because that's kind of where they're rooted. Pre-search is community funded from the start. There's no outside investors. Everybody's aligned around the same unit of value, as you were talking about, which is really, to me, what is the big innovation with Web3 and with blockchain. If you think about, well, how would you launch a search engine 20 years ago? Well, you need $100 million in infrastructure first, right? Well, where are you going to get that? Okay, well, you need the money. And who's going to give it to you? Well, a venture capitalist. Okay, well, what's their mandate? Get a return for their investors. Well, how do you do
mm,
that? Well, you go public on Wall Street or you get acquired. And so it kind of like sets your path. Versus with pre-search, we have had the ability to crowd fund the platform. So people bought pre-search tokens, basically prepaid advertising credits. You could think of it that way, and that then it ensures that we're not rooted in that same legacy system. And then big tech already exists and all these virtual private servers and all this infrastructure. Well, we don't really need to have hundreds of millions of dollars anymore. We now need hundreds of thousands or single digit millions. Okay, well, the community can provide those types of resources, and that has enabled us to kind of get these first versions out that build usage and that enable us to basically market test things. Well, what do people want? Well, they want this multi-search UI, and in a lot of cases, others don't use it, but it doesn't really matter. They want private search. They want rewards for when they search, and as you mentioned, rewarding them for their attention, basically. And they want something that opposes big tech and opposes these kind of dominant narratives that exist out there within the big tech ecosystem. And so we're giving them something that appeals to their ideals, something that appeals to their utility, and then also something that appeals to them from an economic standpoint, because they can purchase pre-search tokens, and as the value of the network increases and the value of the advertising ecosystem increases, theoretically, some people are betting that those tokens are going to benefit from that growth as well. And whether that enables them to advertise more cheaply in the future, or for them to sell those tokens to somebody else who might have different value. Some people have visions and have been doing it of basically building up reselling agencies. They are kind of buying their pool of tokens, and then they're going out and they're reselling them, or they're even just reselling the traffic that those tokens can bring through the advertising platform to their customer base. And so it kind of checks all these different boxes. And along the way, the vision is for it to be transparent and community driven, and ultimately open source. And a lot of people have that same experience that I've had with the early internet, and they think, hey, if there was like a Bitcoin of search or a Wikipedia of search, then that would be a really valuable endeavor to preserve open access to information for all internet users over time. And so, we kind of set the expectations in our first white paper that, hey, this is a really ambitious thing. We actually don't even know how it's going to happen, but we believe that the people who share this vision are going to come together and help realize it. And right out of the gate, as soon as the first white paper was published, Trey, who's our CTO, we couldn't manage to bring him on as our CTO to start because he was doing a really important job with LucidWorks. But he came on as an advisor and started, hey, look, here's how we could actually do it. And that's kind of been the entire genesis and development of the project. It's our community members that end up being elevated, as like Telegram admins or whatever, into development roles, into other roles within the project. And so we have these really passionate people who believe in the mission and the vision. And, it enables us to run like a really flat organization. This is not a traditional, venture where it's all top down. It is like grassroots, ground up. And so all those kinds of things are aligned with that, rooting it in kind of this new paradigm of search. And so there's the technological aspect of it, which is something that's going to always be in development. But the first thing is, can we get a group of people who agree that this is important and see the vision and want to basically make it happen?
Right.
And that's really what has taken time. And over the past, Trey came on in June of 2020. So he's now 2 years in. And so since he came in, we started building out basically this node platform. And, even like this, like we're making it more tangible. This is a pre-berry. It runs on Raspberry Pi. Our community members build it. We're not making them, but our community members have designed these and they're reselling them. And it's a hardware device that you can, plug in and have a turnkey PRESEARCH node that you can operate from home or the office. And it's, kind of coming a little more slowly, I'm sure, than if here's $100 million from VC and let's go, top down do this. But over the long term, it's kind of like got these really deep roots and we're approaching things in a totally different direction that's going to actually enable us to achieve that vision versus, create Google 2.0, let's say, which is like more what Brave will end up doing because they're VC backed and they're very much a top-down organization. They do amazing work, honestly, like incredible work, great browser. They're amazing at product. They've got great branding, but ultimately, a lot of the same pitfalls that some of the other big tech companies have.
Right now, we're recording in mid-June of 2022. We see a lot of the problems that come from rushing things and seeking investment from people with deep pockets. Because it just seems that if you don't fundamentally follow the principles that Bitcoin set out to begin with, right? Bitcoin is not inherently valuable unless there's a community of people that give it value around it because they believe that vision is more important than the alternative, right? So I can see parallels. And usually when a project is designed well, I hear in the back of my head the same type of things. Your endeavors are ultimately to drive decentralization, which is the first principle of Bitcoin, in a different facet of society. That's pretty much it. And in order to do that, I mean, not to, praise PRESEARCH, but overly praise PRESEARCH, but you need time to do that. And it will be slow. And there will be frustrated retail investors that don't see the token going in the proper direction of profitability, perhaps. And I think they're missing the point. I grow tired of when exchange listings in general, coming from the Ergo community in particular. I mean, they're important because they serve as gateways to liquidity and ultimately exposure and access. But the problem is we're so early in this industry that a lot of people might be suffering financially or economically in the real world. And crypto is a nice tool in order to, at least it's a shiny object where you can park a bit of money, speculatively drive up, a certain return on your investment, and then you cash out, you might use it in the real world, and now what, you know? And that empty feeling, at least I think it's an empty feeling of just seeking profit, not understanding that profit and value come from actually building things correctly that actually impact the world. I mean, that's how most companies get their valuations to begin with, at least the good ones, right? I know there's, you know, a lot of playing with numbers with, you know, venture capitalists and stock market and things like that. But ultimately, this is what matters the most, right? You can have two hammers in a Home Depot, you know, in a home improvement store. For those people that don't know what Home Depot is watching this, it could be a hammer that's a little cheaper, sure. You take it home, you use it, and it breaks. Or you could have bought the one that, you know, costs a bit more. You're going to pain a bit in the beginning. It's painful. Why am I paying more for this? Or why am I investing in this? And long term, it actually works out because it was built properly. That's the best analogy I could think off the top of my head. So you touched on the utility that Pre has as a token. I'm interested to know how advertising works. And again, are you locking up the tokens for a certain amount of time? Are you able to unlock them and get them back wherever you want? As the profitability of the Pre token increases, does the threshold for the amount of Pre tokens needed to advertise a certain keyword go down? How does that work?
Yeah, really great observations, man. Honestly, and you know, I love that you're talking about this stuff, and more people need to talk about this stuff. And you know, to me, this is about meaning and what are we trying to do here versus just paper profits and preserving the paradigm. And it does take time, and you know, we've been pretty fortunate. We've mainly attracted those types of people to the project. There are, you know, the people that are just, you know, short-term speculators, but you know, we've largely attracted people who actually want to see a community-driven search engine and have that you know, resilience that's in there, and the anti-censorship and the ability to just have more of a public utility, a public good than, you know, another, you know, corporate kind of enterprise. And so I think, you know, the messages that you put out there and you know, the avenues that you go down can determine, you know, the audience that you bring in. And you know, we've invested time and money and everything into, you know, attracting those types of people to the project, and the language that we use. And, you know, we haven't really been just focused on that speculative side of things. And so we've largely got people that are thinking more long-term. They're more patient. They realize that, you know, for this to be effective is going to be a longer term venture. It's not their flip. We see people all the time that say, oh yeah, I forgot I even have pre-search tokens, or, oh, I don't even think about my pre-search tokens. They're like, you know, they're in it for years, not just for weeks. And it's something that you got to resist as a project lead, getting dragged into that, because I mean, I can see the appeal of it as well. And when you hear from community members about, oh, you know, what about this? What about this? And you do see the excitement, even with the long-term holders, when like, oh, price goes up, everybody gets excited. It's like a huge draw into the project. So that validation of the market is something that does have value, and, you know, you can't ignore it. But, you know, trying to build something really for that actual objective of seeing innovation and of realizing a different future and changing a paradigm, it does take a bit of a different mindset and a different community. And so that's definitely something that, you know, has been top of mind and forefront with the project since the beginning, which has been great. And it has enabled us to innovate and do things like the advertising platform, which uses something called keyword staking that we, you know, just invented just based on, again, you know, my background is in, you know, with Shop City, we sell a subscription. It's a subscription model. The local businesses subscribe to it. But, you know, well, what are the selling features? Why would they want to subscribe? Well, we can provide them with different utilities. So there's different capacity. They have the ability to like post more marketplace items into a store, stuff like that. But one of the main things is within a business directory, which is basically a search engine optimization opportunity. So, you know, you're getting a site like Shop Midland to rank in Google, which is is basically bringing eyeballs when people are searching for something. And it's within this space, it's called directional media, which is like literally people are looking to be directed out to different resources. And there's what's known as transactional intent. So somebody is indicating, hey, I'm looking for something. So you're not just like doing like brand advertising where you're trying to like inject a brand into something that's totally unrelated. It's like, hey, I'm looking for, you know, a hardware store. I'm looking for that hammer, and maybe I'm looking for it in Midland, or maybe I'm looking for it with a specific type of hammer. And you're putting those keywords in. And so then as an advertiser, you want to be in front of those people because they are very qualified potential customers. They have indicated, and you don't need to track them and profile them and do all the stuff that Google does. You know, based on what keywords they've entered, what their transactional intent is, and it's highly valuable. You're getting these kind of qualified customers who are very relevant. And so there's like a really high cost benefit ratio. And so what you are doing in that other business is trying to like get a page ranked on Google. And then part of the selling model is, you know, priority placement. So whoever pays the most ends up showing up higher in the results page that people access. And that has tremendous economic value. That experience has driven this, okay, well, what if we have keyword staking? Which is, you know, we've got right now, there's just one ad slot, because how do we compete against Google? Well, one of the ways from a consumer standpoint is we don't have 5 ads. We only have one. So people are getting a better search experience, right? But over time, it might be 2, or there's, you know, real estate down the right-hand side of the bar if you're on a desktop. There's like different real estate all over within a web page. And there are very creative ways to think of that real estate. But for now, very simple. We tried to keep everything just really basic, and it's like prototype, proof of concept. Does it work? So whoever stakes the most tokens against a given word or phrase has that one ad unit displayed as long as they have the most tokens for that keyword. It's very simple. But and currently there's actually no cost per click on those ads. That is a model that will be coming in. There will be a consumptive charge. It will generate tokens back into the ecosystem. That's ultimately how the project is funded, instead of just coming from treasury, which is kind of mainly what we've been doing right now. But whoever stakes the most tokens, if you cancel your ad, you get the tokens back. If somebody outstakes you, then you're in like the number 2 position. Currently, you don't get any traffic. The next iteration of what we're doing right now will go from being a winner take all model to being like a pro rata model, where, you know, if you stake, 10 tokens, somebody else stakes 90, well, then they're going to get 9/10 of the traffic and you'll get 1/10 of the traffic. And then eventually we open up additional ad units. So whoever stakes the most has the top spot, and whoever stakes second most gets the second spot, et cetera, et cetera. But that basically is a way to innovate while using almost the same very proven ad model that Google has literally brought in hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue with. It's a proven model. It's the best business model on the internet. And so, you know, we're just trying to make it so that everything revolves around the pre-token, because that's what gives value to the token within the ecosystem is that attention. It's that, hey, I can use my token to get an ad in front of somebody as they're looking for something. That's the core.
Wow. So when you bid on that top spot, it is a fluid process of you could be knocked off at any moment. You don't have any security in knowing that I put in a X amount of tokens, I'm good for X amount of days, correct?
There's no time component to it currently. You need to maintain the top spot. You know, it's right now there's still like a huge land rush opportunity, because honestly, like we haven't built out, you know, an ad team. We're basically relying on decentralized, ad agencies that are kind of pushing it out, but we haven't even like built like a program for ad agencies yet, which will be the next step, so that we can give them all the marketing materials and the training that they need to go sell this to their customers. So right now there's keywords that get like, man, tens of thousands of views and nobody's staking them yet. And the current, to answer part of your question, it's currently 100 pre is the minimum to stake. As the price changes, that will go up, or it may go down if the price, stayed down or whatever. But it's 100 pre. Current price of pre is 8 cents. So I mean, you're talking like $8 to stake a thing where you might end up getting thousands or tens of thousands of views on something. And then as far as how it converts, that's up to you. If you write an ad where it's like super relevant to what the keyword is, and if you use the same principles that people use for AdWords, search engine marketing optimization, you'll end up getting pretty significant click-throughs. Over time, this becomes a highly competitive thing as the audience grows, as the value of those ad units with additional targeting, additional filtering. We could eventually introduce things like a little thumbnail image, or hey, this one has a little video icon, and when people click on it, it pops up a video. We could give them interactive ad experiences where they're actually like filling out a poll or some type of feedback on something that people could again incentivize the user through additional pre-tokens. Hey, click our ad. Oh, hey, fill out this thing and we'll give you an additional 1/10 of a pre or half a pre or something like that. It could eventually create this whole marketing ecosystem that is aligned with the community, and where the community doesn't view these advertisers as, oh man, get out of my face. It's like, oh man, I love these guys. These are the guys that are making my pre-tokens worth more money. I love these sponsors. So like, that's kind of the ecosystem that we're building.
Can you go back very quickly to how cost per click functions? Is it that as the advertiser that is staking their pre, you mentioned that it almost kind of degrades your staking balance, because as people click on it, it goes back, and that's how you get funded further?
So what we found through some of these experiments, and we've been at this for a while, so we've run experiments. The first thing that we did was basically an impression based thing where you had to pay in pre, and what we found was like, people don't want to actually spend their pre on a consumptive charge. They were like, no, I think my pre is going to be worth more in the future. Why would I want to spend it now? And it created a negative incentive to actually utilize it for the advertising consumptive fee. So we said, okay, how can we drive significant demand for the pre-token and capture value within the ecosystem, but have it so that people retain their actual pre, which enables them to also capture the growth of the ecosystem. So we developed keyword staking. So you retain the pre. When we implement a consumptive charge, it's actually probably going to be denominated in a stable coin. So you'll pay 10 cents every click, or whatever the actual click cost is, and then your pre determines, will your ad show up or not, or which position will it show up in. And that then kind of bridges those two worlds, because as soon as you get into like the consumptive side of things, then you're getting into ROI, and you're really getting into like, hey, okay, so I spent 10 cents on this ad. If I don't make 12 cents, 15 cents, 20 cents, a buck off of that 10 cents, then I'm not going to keep spending it. And so for us, what we've had to really be focused on, and one of our things is like really improving the quality of the audience, making sure that it's not, like, we have to combat abuse. We have to combat people that are token farming, or people that are in, developing nations where the rewards are more significant than they are in, North America, let's say. So we've had to like a huge percentage of the time that we've spent over the past 5 years has been figuring out this anti-abuse side of things, which is a massive undertaking in and of itself. And we've just rolled out in March a new what we call reward verification system, because we don't believe in KYC, and we don't think as a private search engine that there should be KYC, which is one way to combat fraud, and it's how Brave and many others are doing it. We've been figuring out algorithmic ways to do it while preserving everybody's privacy, yet detecting, okay, hey, this person is just abusing the platform, and looking at, these different models. And so, we went from like in the early days, most of our traffic was coming from like, Central America. Now, 60% of our traffic comes from North America, and then a bunch comes from Europe. And then there's a little bit that's still coming from, other places. And so as that audience grows, and as the quality increases, and as the economic resources of that audience are, more and more significant, then that becomes even more valuable to the advertiser. And at some point you get to that sweet spot, we're almost there, where now we can implement a cost per click, because we know that the people are going to be getting a positive ROI on their actual spend. So we can create demand on the one side, but ultimately most people are like, hey, I don't really care if my traffic isn't the best, because it's not costing me anything. I'm investing in the token in order to get placement and to get that opportunity, but it's not like a thing that's, consuming funds per se. And once that comes in, then we need that traffic quality to be there. So it's kind of like it's a multi-sided marketplace, and you're trying to balance all these different things. And like that takes time, and it takes perseverance.
Yeah.
And it takes, honestly, like, having built a model with Shop City where the model is firing up new multi-sided marketplaces, like I've got a lot of experience into how friggin' hard that is, because it's not easy.
No, yeah, you're kind of creating, you're helping to pioneer new ways of sort of not only consumption, but how people economic models, which is like, yeah, good luck with that. That's a really big undertaking, right? Because pretty much all the economic models we have now currently and with the traditional system are pretty much ingrained in stone. But when you take it to the blockchain, there's a million ways to do things, and there's probably only a few ways to do them right, so it's really a tough, yeah, just a simple question for you to explain the different aspects of it, which aren't necessary to explain, just show kind of the intricacies of not only like human psychology, the value of an asset that started at, it's only driven by the community. Yet the community is also not only the advertisers, they're also the consumers. It helps to level out the playing field for sure, when done properly. Yeah, there's a big project. There's a lot of stuff. I didn't even get into nodes yet. I didn't get into
Yeah.
nodes. I haven't gotten into like any of the other stuff that I wanted to ask
Well,
about.
it's interesting, right? Because like when we were talking about doing this interview, and it was like, okay, I've got an hour, and you're like, I don't usually do an hour. I do like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm like, okay, you know what? This will be interesting, because nobody wants to do 2 hours. Nobody wants to do an hour and a half. They want to do 30 minutes or 20
Really?
or maybe an hour. And so you don't get to go into this level of detail. I haven't talked about any of this stuff with anybody, man. So like,
Oh
you've
no.
got an interesting video here for the people
Yeah.
who are really interested in what we're trying to do.
I I don't get the, I mean, I love YouTube, and God bless anybody making money off of it, and trying to do crypto content. But there's only, in half an hour you're not going to understand a whole lot. You might get more into the speculative parts of tokenomics. But I mean, at least with me, and maybe it's because I've been molded by the ergo ecosystem, right? Um, it I'm looking for how the technology will impact people's lives. Period. I don't give a shit about how profitable pre is versus BAT or whatever. I'm looking for, we have a system that doesn't function very well. Everybody's aware of that. Everybody agrees. Last 2 years have been rough,
Mm-hmm.
and it might get even rougher.
Mm-hmm.
We take the beatings on the chin, and
Mm-hmm.
I firmly believe, like, okay, politics aren't going to change from the inside out. Just get over that. Your vote is not a vote. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it is ultimately like, uh, it's a ballot with asterisks. It will only matter if certain things fall into the right categories, and you don't have control over how those categories are formed. And yeah, it's a really nasty way of performing politics. But I believe when you get money is at the root of all of this, right? If people are able to have control over their money again, which is kind of, again, why Bitcoin was invented in the first place, right? Right after the end of the Great Recession, and somebody had to do it, somebody stepped up, they did it, and they left, and they're anonymous, and they're probably around, but they did the responsible thing, pioneering that type of technology and saying, I'm not going to be here to be put in jail or whatever. You guys do with it what you want. But money's at the center of all of this. And now we're in another recession, or we're, with the pandemic, technically the economy, at least in the Western civilization, which I'm sure has ripple effects around the world, that makes everything, all the economies on the same page of recession. But when COVID hit, everything fell into a recession because obviously there was no way to avoid that. But the kind of keeping economies on life support through printing money and things like that, it almost exacerbated the problems where we're facing, another recession due to the fact of not handling the first recession properly, because everything's like over leveraged and there's so much debt and everything. And, I'm relatively young, but even in my lifetime, this shit gets old. You want to find something else that makes more sense. And the money's at the root of that, right? So without blockchain, there is no pre-search, because you don't have another way to create an economic model that functions outside of the ways that it's always functioned. Data is a big thing now. As so-called Web 2 applications have scaled, we see almost monopolistic companies pretty much have a shopping cart of, okay, we're Facebook, we're going to buy, what is it, the Oculus, like the VR headsets, we're going to buy Instagram, we're going to buy this, we're going to buy that. Amazon buying all the things that they're too lazy to do themselves with AI. Yeah, it's a shopping list. So I don't know what governments think about that in terms of antitrust, but it's obvious that the reason that these products are so-called free, most of them anyway, is because you're the product and your data is really the thing that they're looking for. This is just a vehicle to get you entertained enough so we can harvest that and create more precise products, because they know us more than we know ourselves, and that becomes an issue. So now, the reason, one of the community members in Ergo wanted this interview, from Twitter, but I also looked into pre-search before, and I wanted to understand it more, because if, again, a search engine, you open up your phone, is one of the first things you look at. And it's important to try to make better products. So anyway, going off of that tangent, going back to my question about mainnet launch, what has been achieved over the past few years now that you finally hit the milestone of mainnet launch? Or what makes you, first of all, what's the difference between a testnet and a mainnet? What is this? When do you decide, okay, we're finally going to mainnet, when projects has been in development for X amount of years, right?
Yeah. So yeah, you touched on a lot of really important stuff there, man. And yeah, to me, like what I see, and there's kind of, seems like there's two futures ahead of us. One is this kind of dystopian Chinese style social credit system where the powers that be have the ability to, basically steer people's behavior into the direction that they believe is correct, and basically limit their access to opportunities. We saw it here in Canada when all of a sudden the government started, freezing bank accounts for people that were protesting against COVID mandates. That whole legacy system is really not something that's set up in our favor ultimately, and it has the ability to be controlled and influenced in a way that doesn't support real freedom and liberty. And a lot more people have been talking about this, and I've seen it like for a long time on like a local level. Like I always thought, okay, how would you take away power from like central banks? Well, you need strong local economies, and you should actually have local currencies for all these different local economies. And ultimately, you could have this model where you could create a interchangeable peg or some type where you could move between different local economies. And so blockchain is kind of like that technology that facilitates that, but you can have it on a global level as well, which I think is Bitcoin. And I think honestly, like the easiest thing to make Bitcoin huge, which like I don't know why people don't talk about it. We need to stop denominating everything in US dollars. Honestly, if we're gonna like actually have this movement be a success, we need to get off of thinking of everything in USD. It's like the most basic thing. Well, how do you do that when, okay, one Bitcoin is worth, whatever, 22,000 or 28,000 or 65,000 is complicated. And what is a Satoshi? Well, that's friggin' like, honestly, like it's geeky and it's awesome for geeks, but for the average person, but you know what, man? Bitcoin has 100 million units, which are the Satoshis, but the million units are actually called bits. And if you were trying to get bit to dollar parity, which would make Bitcoin worth $1 million, then things would be very easy to understand. And you could denominate things in bits instead of in dollars. And I think that that's kind of the thing that needs to happen over the next little while we can. and what I see, PRESEARCH playing a role in, and decentralized technology in general, is facilitating kind of this parallel ecosystem, a parallel economy where people who think this way, who have these values, who care about this, who want to bring about a freer future, who are concerned about falling into future number 2, which is dystopian. Well, how do we start ensuring that we have access to all the information that we're going to need, and then how can we start channeling our purchasing power into those who also support these ideals and values, and how can we come together in different marketplaces so that we know who to support, and so that those people know, hey, here's how do I reach this audience of people who might be buyers of my product or service. And that's where I think, PRESEARCH and other marketplaces can play a role. And then you need products like, Ethereum, like Ergo, like these blockchains to provide that, underlying immutable ability to have that economic value be utilized throughout that ecosystem, so that you're not tethered to those legacy ecosystems. And like that to me is the innovation that's happening here, and that's the mission that we're trying to work towards. And whenever we start just thinking of, oh, well, did it increase in dollar terms? Like, why the hell are we even talking dollar terms, man? Like, you can't compare like $1 in 2022 to $1 in 2017 when Bitcoin had its last bull run. Man, like people think that the bull run is over. My God, man, we're on one of the freaking dips and we have barely scratched the surface. And it's because the actual dollar value has been so bastardized that it's completely different. If you told me I'll give you 100 grand in 2017 or you'll give me 100 grand in 2022, man, in 2017, I could buy a hell of a lot more than I can in 2022. If you're talking, used cars, new cars,
pretty much everything.
Everything, man. Like everything has gone up, and like 100 grand is like a completely different. So why are we denominating in this thing that is shrinking, right? And what I think is a way to approach it with the bits is if we like agree and we do it instead of like backwards looking, we start doing forwards looking, and we go, okay, first goal is 1 bit is equal to 10 cents, which then makes Bitcoin worth 100,000 in those terms, right? We haven't been that far off. We've been as high as like 6.5 cents. We're almost to that point. Right now, we're at whatever, 2.5, right? But if we set that goal, and if I as a merchant say, hey, I'm going to accept bits at a 10 cent to a bit peg, then I know, hey, if we're all working in that direction, I don't need to spend the bits right now. I'm going to start accumulating, and I'm going to give people an incentive to start paying me in this different currency, and start denominating my stuff in bits, which again is something that these marketplaces can do. Presearch could also do, providing a window to content that is, maybe USD is one of the options, but maybe you want to see by default all your prices in bits, right? And then as we get towards 10 cents, then we say, hey, next peg is we want 25 cents a bit, and then 50 cents a bit, and then $1 a bit, and then we're at 1-to-1 parity. And in the meantime, we've now grown it to a $21 trillion economic unit, which should support just about everything within the real economy. Screw the quadratic freaking super rehypothecated whatever freaking fake digital assets, or not digital assets, fake financial assets that don't even exist. When we're talking about like these really bizarre fake, hey, I'm going to sell you a contract on a contract on a contract on a contract. And oh yeah, by the way, you don't get to read any of those other 3 contracts. You only have to read my top level contract, which I'm going to now say is worth, I think there's something like, I don't know, $200 trillion in derivatives. What the hell's the derivative, man? Derivatives are fake. They don't exist. They work only to support the financial ecosystem. What matters is the real economy. How big is the real economy? You know what? 21 trillion would probably cover it. Okay, so that's a way where we can get Bitcoin to be like that, way to denominate. And then we have all these other ways that can have pegs. Doge could be a currency. ETH could be a currency. Monero could be a currency, and they could all have pegs to bits. That to me is how you kind of like chunk down this problem. And it's a big one. It's going to take some time. We've got, in my opinion, a limited window before they implement central bank digital currencies and try to like shift all of our attention over in that direction. But I'm hoping that between now and then, when there is likely to be some serious pain, that we can wake up enough people and give them a tangible enough model for how to get from A to Z that they just start doing it. They download a wallet like Edge Wallet, for instance, which by default denominates it in bits. And then I will send you 10,000 bits instead of, 0.001 of a Bitcoin, which is like, seems like friggin' nothing, right? It's like these really simple things, dude. And honestly, like I look at the thought leaders in this space sometimes, I'm like, man, where is the actual leadership? We're looking in reverse constantly. Oh, how can I get Bitcoin to be worth $25,000? How can I get Bitcoin to be worth $100,000? Man, we need to be forward looking. How do I get 1 bit to be worth 25 cents? How do I get 1 bit to be worth, and then you have everything denominated in bits. To go back to Presearch and mainnet.
Wait, before we go into that, I want to address you about that. That's a really interesting idea. The way we look at things influence a lot, obviously, on the importance we give it, right?
Yep.
You're talking about kind of reverse engineering the idea of Bitcoin being priced in dollars instead of seeing, essentially, how many dollars do I need to get to a Bitcoin? Just like you buy a car, you buy a computer, you buy a home. The only reason you are concerned with the US dollar price is because it is a barrier to you getting the actual thing. You're not looking for, a computer, which you'll record an interview on, and saying, well, how many dollars is this worth because I care about the dollars? You care about the dollars because it's a medium of exchange to getting the utility that a computer it will give you.
Yes.
And in Bitcoin's case, unless you were very early on, even if you were early on, you probably, money is very tempting and corrupting. You might say, hey, I hit the lotto and I'm going to liquidate this, or I'm going to hold on to it. But the idea of Bitcoin is just to give you an alternate vehicle to do financing. That's it. And
Yes.
if we focus too much on the US dollar value, which, I get it, it's an easy way to measure things, but if we do that, like you said, we're missing the point of why we're in this space in the first place, because we're worried more about the dollar signs than the actual Bitcoin and asset itself. The messaging is wrong.
Yes.
You make a very good point. I never thought of it that way.
We, we, we need to
Yeah, go
focus
ahead.
on the utility of the ledger. The utility of the ledger is what frees us from those who have the ability to control the ledger right now. And this is, like, to me, a way that is quite tangible that we could get there. And I've been hesitant to some degree in the past to speak about it because some of this stuff is like disruptive, but I think time is of the essence right now, and it's time to start building a movement towards this and trying to rally more and more people around this shift, because it's I think time is short for us to continue to have the freedoms that we do, and we have seen through what's happened in the past 2 years. Those freedoms can be taken away a lot more easily, I think, than many of us thought was possible. And so we've got this window.
Right.
Let's take advantage of it.
Yeah. Going back to mainnet, you were saying about that question between, what draws that line between a test net and a mainnet if you've been working on the thing for years, and what is the significance of a mainnet launch and pre-search? Can't talk right now. Pre-search. I'm saying pre-research. What is the significance of a mainnet launch right now, hitting that milestone for pre-search?
So basically, Trey came on board in 2020. He in 2018 had written a white paper for us, just an internal one, of how we could get to this point where we could have an actual, functional search engine. It would be a meta search engine, but it would be a really big step in the direction of building out that infrastructure layer that would enable us to build the fully decentralized search engine, and that would give us a really good quality user experience that would enable us to continue bootstrapping the project to get to that point. And it basically involved building out, a piece of software that could be very easily installed on kind of a standardized platform. It's built on something called Docker, which is can run on just about any type of operating system. And it's kind of like a containerized environment that has all the different components that you need to run a web service. And so we have basically the pre-search node software, which is what they call a Docker image, which you can download and you can run through Docker. And that image has currently the main software function is receiving an anonymized query, going out, getting these results from all these search engines, databases, APIs, combining them back, and then presenting that result to the user. But what we built in order to facilitate that and to get like these 70,000 user nodes is the ability basically for a node to join a registry to say, hey, I have computing resources available, that we can then allocate a task to it. We can measure its performance. Hey, how long did it take? How reliable is it? Did it succeed or fail? All those kinds of things. Where is it located so that we can, geographically distribute those nodes into like gateways that basically handle the searches from different geographic regions on the planet, and then reward people who are operating those nodes in pre-search tokens so that they continue to provide that infrastructure into the project. And right. Then, we have a staking component to it, because we can't just have, people with no skin in the game contributing nodes that could be poisoning the results. So, there's a cost basically to operating that node, and, it's an asset that you continue to own. So it's not like you're paying necessarily to provide the service, but you need to collateralize your node basically and buy, the current is 2,000 PRESEARCH tokens. You allocate that, you lock that into your node through the PRESEARCH staking portal. And then you can run as many nodes really currently as you want. We have some people that are running hundreds, or maybe even there might be somebody over 1,000. But for the most part, we're trying to have like as decentralized as possible, software that's running, whether it's on a laptop or a home device that has a good internet connection and is always on and is, performant, or it could be on a virtual private server that is running in a data center, or it could be running off of a, business's web server, whatever. And that gives us kind of this footprint that enables the network to process the tasks that get allocated to it. And so to start, it's that first one, which is aggregating. But the next one that we're going to be rolling out is crawling. And then after that, it will be indexing. There will be file storage. There will be relevance. There will be, many other things that will come in order to build the actual full search engine with an external relevance algorithm. But the difference between testnet and mainnet is at the end of 2020, we basically had the software so that it could run on a node and it could process those results and do all that kind of core functionality. But we were running, so when you went to, it used to be presearch.org, now it's presearch.com, but when you went to the search engine, you would run your query, and those nodes were processing that information in that exact way, but we were running all the nodes ourselves on centralized hosting infrastructure, which made the attack surface very big or very small, depending on how you want to look at it, and
Right.
possible to be taken down. What we had been doing then is we had a test net where you could go search. It was like another domain name. And when you searched on that, then those queries were actually going out to the network of user nodes. And we were hoping we would get to like 5,000 user nodes. And then, it kind of blew up the end of last year. Like we ended up getting, and, not one for government regulation, obviously, but in the EU, Google, who owns Android, which is the number one mobile operating system, which they also own Chrome, which is the number one web browser. And then, of course, they own Google, which is the number one search engine. The EU, basically, as part of an antitrust effort, forced Google through Android and Chrome to implement a search choice screen, which instead of by default, you get Google. Well, now you have to pick Google, or you can pick from any of this other list. Well, PRESEARCH got included in that list, and that became a pretty big press event within the crypto space. And a lot of people found out about PRESEARCH. The token value shot up, and a ton of people started spinning up these nodes. Well, next thing we know, we were hoping for 5,000. Now we're at 10,000. Then we got to 40,000. And then like 50,000 nodes. Well, now we're at 70,000 nodes. So we've got a nice broad footprint, very resilient. But on May 26th, we shifted so that those queries that people were typing into presearch.com were no longer going to our centralized nodes. Now they're going to the distributed nodes all over the world, operated by all independent people. And that required a whole other layer of things, because for us running our nodes, we didn't care about rewards. We didn't have any security concerns. We didn't have the same performance concerns. And so we had to build all the software that would basically manage, balancing, distributing, tracking rewards, like just our rewards, records. There's like 2 or 3 billion, maybe more now, rewards records. So there's all these little microtransactions. So like that ultimately we're looking to put onto a blockchain. It's currently not. There's no blockchain that would support that volume of transactions. We're going to be building our own PRESEARCH blockchain at some point, looking at things like, Avalanche subnets and Polygon Edge. I haven't looked at Ergo, to tell you the truth, yet. I only became familiar with it through you. So I'm interested to see what it might offer. We're kind of doing due diligence basically on which blockchains are going to be used. And it might be a whole, hybrid of different blockchains doing different specific tasks within the ecosystem. Ultimately, we think it should be a multi-chain world. And we think that each community that surrounds each chain brings its own value. And that ultimately,
Sure.
PRESEARCH should support many different chains and utilize many different chains within the ecosystem and enable the
Right.
user to choose as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't come to Ergo.
Yeah, well, check it out,
I,
man.
um, but ultimately, I agree, right? The future is going to be multi-chain, and it won't be, Ethereum. I don't know. I don't know about the future of Ethereum. How do you have any insight on, well, how difficult it would be to translate to a different blockchain using knowing the fact that you've started your journey on Ethereum as your launchpad for the pre-token?
So I mean, like if you think about like our current use of blockchain, is primarily for rewards, and so like when we're incentivizing searchers, as well as referrers. So there's like a referral program. Anybody who refers other people to sign up for PRESEARCH earns free tokens. So those are like kind of the two reward mechanisms on that side, and then we have the staking on the keyword and on the node side. But we have basically at this point, like the staking is happening off chain. So you're basically transferring tokens into a platform, and then that platform is where you're managing your stake. So at this point, our actual blockchain integration is minimal, and it's had to be because honestly, Ethereum's fees have been obscene, and they would not support on-chain usage for all
Oh
these different
yeah,
activities. It would not make sense. And so the main integration at this point is between wallets, that inbound and outbound from the platform, and exchanges. What does Ethereum bring to the platform, to the table? Ethereum brings interoperability with wallets and exchanges. That's like the core. It's super easy to do. It's got a very robust security model. There, haven't really been, a lot of outside of like crazy, DeFi exploits. If you're just using like the core functionality of Ethereum, it's quite secure. It's also reliable. So Solana goes down every once in a while.
hmm,
Ethereum doesn't go down. You don't have to build out your own network of validators, all the actual blockchain infrastructure. The other thing
sure,
Ethereum brings to the table is the community of developers. They've got probably the best developer community. They've got the high costs. They've got this whole like fundamental, what do we want to be when we grow up problem? Are we going to be proof of work? Are we going to be proof of stake? How's that transition going to go? What's proof of stake going to look like? Is it going to get more centralized? And then it has like somewhat strange ideological things, even like like the World Economic Forum is like all pro Ethereum, and Vitalik has made some comments that like I sometimes like I wonder like if he got, and he literally wondered about himself, which shows the degree of
hmm,
self-awareness he has, where he's like, ooh, I find myself aligning more with the elites than with the plebes. I really hope that the elites don't ask me to do something that is against the plebes. Like that's something, not that he has the ability to go in and like monkey with something. It's software, but he has the ability to influence the direction of the platform to an outsized degree where it might be, well, do we want to lose Vitalik or not? And that becomes like a big thing for the platform. So right now, like, the EVM model, the Ethereum virtual machine model is quite robust. And I would say it's the most robust programming language for blockchain. I've heard some really good things about some other ones that are like, more obscure, like Digibyte, and there are some others that a lot of people don't talk about, that apparently they're quite robust and very interesting models. But, right now we've been looking at like, okay, how else could we do this where we can get the throughput, where we can get the low fees, where we can get that like kind of dedicated access to the blockchain, where it's not like, oh, somebody ramped up a CryptoKitties and now Presearch doesn't work, right? Like that sucks. But still being compatible with EVM is ideal, which is why we're talking with Polygon about subnet, and talking to Polygon about Edge and Avalanche about subnet. But I don't know what Ergo uses, but EVM is interesting. That said, for Presearch currently, like we're really not using a whole lot of EVM functionality, and we may end up like building out our own programming language that just does the specific things. There aren't really, surprisingly, considering search is such a huge economic opportunity, and it is something that touches so many people, and it's something that, like for us, like you have the ability to actually build a user behavior because it's something that people do so often in their everyday life. There hasn't been a lot of focus on search. There's Presearch, there's the graph, which is building like an indexing protocol that might be something that we may take advantage of. But for the most part, there isn't like a lot of blockchain service that is oriented specifically to search and relevance. So ultimately, I don't know where we're going to go yet, and we're at a point where we haven't made any key decisions yet. We're also looking at, well, how does that tie into, okay, if we need to run our own blockchain and governance and all the other things as we're trying to fully decentralize Presearch, how does that all tie together as well? So it's not just a technical consideration.
Right. Well, with Ergo, all I can say is that we have Ergo script, which is written based on Scala, which is a general scripting language that is meant to eventually rival the virtual library of Ethereum for Ergo script. And we use the extended UTXO model, so scaling is not as much of an issue as it would be in the account-based model approach, like with Ethereum and other ones, which is why you have gas fees. But so yeah, like for example, we did one transaction airdrops where there were 10,000 outputs within a single transaction. So things like that are possible. It's a lot more robust and mendable than even general UTXO models. It's just a different transaction architecture with less limitations, meant to be future proof. That's as far as I can go there because this is about Presearch.
Sure.
But I would recommend keeping all options open, seeing how Ergo develops, looking more into there, and seeing if it's a good fit or not. But anyway, so there is a supply cap to the token supply of pre-tokens, right? 500 million.
Mm-hmm.
What incentives can users get after that supply cap runs out, and what is the emission timeline for that?
So, I mean, ultimately, like on the reward front, like one of the models that I think is actually really compelling is not rewarding people in pre and enabling other projects to supply the rewards in exchange for exposure, so that ultimately like pre is a deflationary or fixed asset, where there is no ongoing emissions after we've basically booted the project up to the point where we have that platform in place. So right now we've got like this whole anti-abuse platform, which we've spent a lot of time developing, very relevant to any project that is looking to reward people and reward real people without requiring KYC. And so like on the search front right now, all the rewards are denominated and provided in pre. In the future,
Right.
it might be, oh, hey, rewards for this week are provided by Ergo. And, you're basically accumulating some Ergo tokens as you're searching, and Ergo's getting brand exposure within the search environment. And could be the same thing on the reward front for node operators. Hey, you're no longer, getting pre as your exclusive reward, and it might be that it's a percentage of the rewards, or it might be that we just do things differently as far as how do we cycle other funds back into pre and purchase them off the market and then provide them for rewards. It will basically, to some degree, depend on what is the supply of pre. If we have a hard time getting pre because like people are only using it for the ad platform and it becomes very scarce, well, then we might be forced to do rewards in strictly other project tokens, which, ultimately it's like, what are the rewards for? The rewards are for the carrot to search through pre-search, refer people to pre-search, build on pre-search and contribute to the ecosystem, as well as provide the infrastructure to pre-search. And so it might be that we look at, well, what are the really key things where like the upside should be 100% in pre, and then other things it might be more of like an earnings based kind of thing where, hey, you're getting something and it's paid for by other projects in their native token, which they have in abundance because they have minted them. And it's a fairly easy kind of sales process on our side. Hey, do you want exposure to, we've got 3.8 million registered users right now. There's about 5 million searches a day that are happening through the platform. Do you want exposure to all those people? And they're all, crypto enthusiasts. If you do, okay, here's the cost to be the sponsor for the week. You got to put up X in your tokens, and then that's what we use for rewards. So, we're thinking about that in different ways, I would say, probably than a lot of projects. And also NFTs are an interesting thing. Like, I think of digital real estate. So pre-search has, that ad space for a keyword, that ad space for a keyword within a geography, that ad space within a geography on a mobile device and a desktop device. Those are all like different pieces of digital real estate. There may be a model where, we replenish the pre back into the system by selling NFTs that correspond to those ad slots. And then we enable those people to monetize those ad slots to generate their own pre by reselling it. So like, if I'm thinking of how do we get 100,000 agencies all over the world to go out and bring people into the pre-search advertising ecosystem, well, man, you're going to be a lot more apt to focus on it if you know, hey, I own that spot and I'm going to go out and get that spot filled, and whatever I get it filled for is what I get to keep, or you get to keep the majority of it, or a fraction of it, whatever it is. And oh, hey, somebody else wants to resell my spot, I'm going to allow them, and then they get X, I get Y, platform gets Z. Like there's so many ways to slice and dice this digital real estate. And NFTs I think are really interesting because it's that like contractual asset versus oh, hey, I'm reselling the Google AdWords platform. Oh yeah, but like, do you know how many resellers of Google AdWords have like just been decimated by Google saying, oh, thanks, we don't need you anymore, we're gonna have a direct relationship now. Like all the Yellow Pages ad companies, man, they were like the biggest advocates for Google, and Google just like smoked them because they eventually said, hey, we've got the relationship, we don't need you anymore. So NFTs are a way to like enshrine that relationship in a code-based contract, and then have it with that same immutable programmatic system-based approach that is what is so special about blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot there. I'm trying to figure out where do I begin to unpack that. Well, is it how does the token supply work being an Ethereum token? I'm gonna try to put you in the hot seat for a moment.
Sure.
are there community governance? Is that coming around? How are decisions made within Presearch? And yeah, again, how does since you do run on Ethereum, you're able to issue a token like any other project, and ultimately the infrastructure around it, everything we're talking about is going to provide that value. But how are these any changes implemented? What voice does the community have in changes? And yeah, like what degree of rulemaking do you guys have as the core team now that mainnet has launched, and how will that proceed going forward as well?
Yeah, so I mean, like honestly, right now it's highly centralized. It's, the core team, it's myself. It's currently a centralized entity that I have 100% ownership of, and I have put my commitment through all the white papers and the communications that, like, I don't want to be another Mark Zuckerberg or a Jeff Bezos or these guys. Honestly, like, I've been a reluctant leader. I wish this thing just existed so I could go promote it and utilize it. And like, as far as I'm concerned, like, no one person, definitely not me, has the right to, lord over this thing as it continues to grow. I have been, in my opinion, right now, kind of, stewarding it and trying to ensure that it doesn't get corrupted, and trying to ensure that we set that kind of core of values and culture and community members who share that same alignment, and same with the team. But what we're getting into now, as we're looking at, okay, we're going to need a blockchain, we're going to need governance capabilities, is that we're going to need to figure all those really challenging things out and ensure that the project is set up for success, so that it doesn't fall prey to the same things that have happened with all the other centralized search engines. And so the team is committed to that, the community is committed to that. It currently is, it's a trust us situation and trust me situation, until we can get all those kind of, mechanisms, processes, guardrails in place. But I don't think I should be setting them, honestly. I think the community should be setting them. And I think we need other people coming into the community to help establish those. And ultimately, like the way that we've thought of the project from the start is, the end state is decentralized. The beginning state is extremely centralized, and we are decentralizing over this whole time. How do we go from A to Z? And to start, we've just been focusing on, building that community, building that culture, building that core utility of the platform that can get Presearch to the point where it can have just sustainable token economics. And then, we introduce the governance mechanisms and start enabling the community to put all of those processes in place to help steer the project forward. And so, I mean, we've been relying on basically Ethereum's, core governance and their immutability to start for everything that's on chain. Everything that's off chain is, kind of within the control of our CTO, essentially. I mean, I don't know how to do it. I can't access it. It's Trey really is the guy that's, ultimately at this point. And, we've got multi-sig on things that are requiring to be multi-sig. But, it's the development team, it's Trey. And then, what we're trying to transition to over the next, I would say starting like, and real progress over the next 6 months, like between now and the end of the year, we'd like to see some pretty significant progress on the governance side of things. And it's just been kind of like a confluence of things like, because Presearch has traction, we've been approached by, some of these bigger chains that have these like Subnet and like Edge. And as part of that, it would be like, protocol governance. And so it's like, we're reaching the traction standpoint. We're reaching now the technical standpoint where, there's some pretty interesting solutions. that would enable us to handle this. And it's a community standpoint where we've got enough people right now that are actually interested and caring and have good intentions and have a proven track record within the pre-search community of being also good stewards of the project, where, you know, those people can start to rise up and take on more of a role in helping it evolve to the next level. And for me, like honestly, like the sooner the better, man. Like just from a you know, resilience standpoint, and from a, you know, hey, I'm not getting any younger standpoint, and I've got a kid, and I'd love to, you know, not be just the guy. Honestly, man, like, you know, to me, my family's the most important thing, and I would love for the everybody within the project just to like start taking on more and more things and elevating things to the point where, you know, that centralized entity basically does a you know, transition where it hands off all the, you know, intellectual property and all the ability to operate and the, you know, all the treasury to a DAO. And we're hoping that that's going to be happening over, again, kind of, you know, in earnest the next 6 months. And then ultimately it might take, you know, a couple of years or something to fully transition. But open to your thoughts, open to everybody's thoughts on how best to do it, man. We're trying to find like best practices and who's doing it well. And honestly, there's a lot of learning going on right now.
Yeah, no, you're not alone in gripping coming to terms with the reality of that kind of awkward catch-22. You have to kind of, to get the training wheels on a project, you have to make centralizing decisions on where it will go before you could, just like a child, you know, you come out of the womb, you don't know how to walk yet, you got to get to a point where you're able to make knowledgeable, informed decisions in adulthood. And when you you have you know, like 2 decades for a child, for a newborn, but in the tech world, you're lucky if you get 5 years, you know, and 10 years, and patience and all that. So to bring a project up to maturity where it can become so resilient on its own, it is very tricky. And then you know, the Ergo Foundation shares that same that idea of being a necessary evil in order to help to bring a decentralized protocol to where it needs to be, but with the minimal amount of centralizing power as possible. But it's a tough thing to do. And then, you know, there has to be some sort of public confidence in that the project is going in the right direction. And then ultimately giving over the, you know, the means to continue the project without the doxed individual or individuals behind it. It's really tough. But everybody, I think any real organization or organized effort in blockchain that wants to be decentralized ultimately has to start in this saturated space with a group of people trying to make decisions, and then try to develop the infrastructure in order to let that go to a community. For what it's worth, Cardano literally has 5 eras, and the last one is governance. You know, yes, they would like you know, it's the same message. They would like the community to begin showing initiative and taking over. Same thing with Ergo, same thing with all of these protocols. But ultimately, things are rolled out in phases, and you know, it's impossible to completely give the keys to the kingdom before all of the other things are in place. And if you're able to do that at the same time, you know, more power to you. But the more ambitious the vision is, the more, you know, the longer it takes to hand over those keys, essentially. Go ahead.
Just quickly, and I think as well, like, you know, one of the things like with pre-search is it's kind of like a bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. Like it's accessing content on Web 2. That's really, you know, the utility of it. I mean, we could build just a blockchain search engine, but honestly, it'd be very little value for, I don't know, another 10 or 20 years. And in the meantime, this is something where there's a huge need, and we have the need to access openly, you know, the information that exists on the real web. And so it'd be one thing if you can build an ecosystem from scratch where it's like a totally independent ecosystem, but anytime where you're integrating with legacy systems in any way, it does require some of that, decision making, some of that responsibility, some of that trust. And I mean, even if you think about Bitcoin, I mean, like Bitcoin had Satoshi or the early founders, and Bitcoin was highly centralized for the first little while, and then ultimately they were able to get the adoption to a point, and get the value to a point where the community kind of took over. And yeah, that's kind of the goal for Presearch. That's the goal for everywhere, but it isn't like I don't think generally a thing where just a bunch of anonymous people with totally good intentions that have just all altruistic, they don't care about skin in the game, whatever, just comes out of nowhere and builds something of tremendous value. There's amazing open source projects, don't get me wrong, that have done exactly that. But what we're talking about right now is it's more that economic side of things. That's what makes blockchain different than just traditional open source software. And if you think about like that, well, that generally doesn't happen. And you're competing against central banks, you're competing against gift card issuers, and like all these other, like those are like the only real examples of different economic ecosystems, and they're all very highly centralized. So this like the success already that Bitcoin has had in proving that it's possible, and the success that Ethereum has had proving that it's possible to do it in a programmatic fashion as well, where it's not just economic value, it's actual like data and other value is it can be done. Yeah. So now we got to do it for all these other reasons, with all these other opportunities and platforms and all these other communities, because we don't want one programmatic blockchain and one financial blockchain. We need multiple blockchains for resilience, for decentralization. I always find it so ironic when you hear like decentralists say, "Oh yeah, man, Bitcoin, only Bitcoin all the way." It's like, are you serious? Like, do you realize like the irony in what you've just said? Like, I heard one time say, yeah, we're building this platform that's going to, have all your data and all your da-da-da. It's going to be like the one platform that you're going to need. And I'm like, that sounds highly centralized. That is not decentralized at all, just because it's using blockchain. So right. I think, yeah, it's a challenge. It's going to be interesting. There's going to be definitely some learnings, and anybody who's watching who has an interest in figuring it out, like, let us know. Collaborate at presearch.io. Join us on Telegram, t.me/presearch, discord.presearch.com. We're looking for people who care about this stuff and want to figure these things out.
Yeah. I wanted to, before we head on out, I have two urgent questions as well. How has the monthly user rate been? Is it like an exponential growth? Are you seeing that every month more people coming online? Do you have any metrics on, well, it would be asking a lot, but general, user search engine, the amount of time people spend on search engines versus the amount of time people spend on pre-search, if there's any metrics on like retainment or at least a monthly user to start, how has that been going?
Yeah, I mean, best thing, honestly, go to SimilarWeb and you can do a search on pre-search domains, and it's got, kind of externally validated information for the most part. I mean, we haven't been tracking, like information in the same way that we would, obviously we're not using Google Analytics, and we're not using, any of these really in-depth tracking systems. So we've got, different data that we can use, that we can, talk about and share. And there's going to be more that, basically I do a weekly update every Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And I share that information in all those updates. What are the users for the week? What are, what are the amount of tokens that are staked? How many keywords are staked? All those kinds of things. And that's kind of, what we deliver to the community every week. And then that goes into, a blog post. I would say it comes more in waves than anything, because we're still very like tied to the crypto space and crypto enthusiasts. Just like if you look at the traffic for CoinMarketCap, if you look at the traffic for CoinGecko, sure. It fluctuates based on how many people are pumped up about crypto. And our objective is to get to a point where it is more of a mass market audience, where it's people that are using it, 100% just because, hey, it's as good as Google. And then you'll see less of that. And we've seen definitely an increase in user retention as the platform gets better and better and better. But, we saw like a huge wave of new users, over like 2021. Honestly, it was nuts. We went from, 200,000 searches a day to 2 million to 3 million, 4 million, and now we're doing about 5 million searches a day. And so as the market has declined, like we've kind of to some degree been impacted by that as well. And then also we've been focusing this whole time on improving the quality of the traffic as well. So we undertook a huge effort to combat farmers and just to deter anybody from using pre-search for anything besides just organic searches. And we've implemented that whole new system in March. And so like we intentionally kind of blew up some of our traffic numbers, which from a vanity standpoint, we could have, it's growing to the moon. But, ultimately we need to focus on quality to ensure that advertiser experience is really positive. So it's been, solid continued growth. In 18 months, it's gone from 200,000 to 5 million searches a day. Wow. The quality has improved massively at the same time. And then things like the Android partnership, and not that it's a partnership, but the inclusion and CoinMarketCap, we have a formal partnership with them where they power our crypto API and they give us significant exposure on CMC. Things like that definitely drive new waves of users and more growth.
I have 3 final questions. Well, first off, you mentioned the Android devices. How long ago did that occur, that you were included in this European Union? We have to give you an option on the engine that you use. Do you know when that actually occurred? That
September
law
1st.
Of last year?
September 1st of last year, yeah.
So how many browsers do you know are on that list? And was PreSearch already one of the first ones on it?
PreSearch was not on. When we got in, I think it was the second time that they had made this available. And I believe there's 12 slots, and that they basically it's something you have to apply into. And then they do it not just across the entire EU, they do it on a country by country basis. PreSearch was one of the only ones that got included in all the countries. So there were some, like there's a search engine called Mojik that's, out of the UK. And they've been at it for a long time, and they're, good people as well. And, potential allies with PreSearch, but they didn't get included in all the places because their thing is English only. So stuff like that.
How do you deal with kind of you mentioned kind of how unsurveilled actors might abuse the system that you put in place? How do you deal with I don't want to say not safe for work, but just like people putting things where it shouldn't be. How do you deal with that in a decentralized manner where, you're trying to be anti-censorship, but ultimately people abuse the system and then, put things where they shouldn't be? How does that work?
it it's going to be a huge challenge, honestly. Like, it's a cat and mouse thing, right? But basically, the way that roughly we're thinking about it, because right now we're largely relying on, what do the other data sources do, and so to some degree, it's not necessarily being handled internally by the platform, although it is in some circumstances, and where we're trying to like implement anti-censorship basically, and we know that different search sources have less censored results for different terms, and we can prioritize them as we're doing kind of this meta aggregation of different search sources. But how we think about it is that there's kind of like a flagging system so that community members can identify content that is either spam, which would be the main concern, or second one would be like illegal content essentially. And at that point we need to make the decision, and Elon Musk has been talking about Twitter content lately, and he's been saying, hey, we think we need to give people like totally free reign on stuff as long as it's not actually illegal to allow it. And that's a bit of a slippery slope, because there are all these things that are becoming illegal, hate speech, whatever, and hate speech can evolve into a whole bunch of different things. And so there's going to ultimately be the question of, well, which jurisdiction, and how does all that kind of play into things. But essentially you would enable community members to flag that content, potentially be rewarded for identifying harmful content, harmful being primarily spam, and then that going out to basically, and like this is kind of where it ties in with governance, with some type of community group that can look at first creating the rules. Well, what is harmful? What is spam? What is irrelevant? What is whatever? All that needs to happen. And then once that's done, okay, somebody said that this violates this term, and then it going to basically some type of like a decentralized, group of people who can go in and say yay or nay. And then, enabling that person who first posted it to either earn rewards or maybe lose rewards if they're proposing, hey, this should be flagged, but meanwhile it's totally fine, and it's somebody who's doing it for anti-competitive reasons, which is like there's multiple layers on of this problem, right? It happens all the time within search engine marketing, where people are like clicking on competitor ads, or where people are submitting fake reports to try to get somebody's website removed from an index. Like Google has all these things. That's how they're already handling it. So it's something similar to that, but having it so that instead of it being in the Google guidebook, which is only Google knows what it is, and some team of people, who knows who they are, making all these decisions, it's like an open guidebook. Hey, here's how it works. And hey, maybe there's an edge case, and people discover it because it doesn't have security through obscurity. It's out in the open. Oh, well, we need to solve it now, right? And having that evolving set of rules, and then having the people who can participate in validating them, and participating in that curation process, ultimately building some type of feedback mechanism where the people who are doing the rating can be rated, and then having that develop into like a trust score for that account to have weight within the ecosystem. It's honestly, it's not a trivial thing, man. And like, if you can figure all this stuff out and do it in a public, decentralized way, it has lots of other applications as well, because it comes down to decision making, right? And decision making has applications within politics. It has applications within veracity of information. Like there's tons of really interesting things, but it's a really challenging problem, and it's going to take many years to really solve it.
Yeah, yeah, we haven't even solved it within other, aspects of society. And here I am asking you guys, how are you going to solve it?
How are
Or
we
how are
gonna
you going
solve
to
it?
deal with
Yeah.
that?
Oh,
Yeah.
hey man,
Or,
if I
yeah,
had the silver bullet, honestly, we would implement it. But definitely,
yeah,
there is
yeah,
no
yeah,
silver bullet, and I know I don't have it. And that's
yeah,
honestly why, like, the financial side of things, and I mean, the programmatic side of things, that Bitcoin and Ethereum have solved have been, tremendously valuable, tremendously impactful, but also fairly limited in scale. How do you solve double spend? How do you solve, brute force attacks against, programmatic execution of code? Like there's those are very important, very big things, huge things, but they're like a
yeah,
subset of something like that. How do you determine what is most relevant when somebody is looking for it? Holy crap, that's not trivial.
yeah, yeah. Well, the purpose of me asking a question is not so you could give me a solution right on the spot,
Yep.
but more as to open up the discussion, because um yeah, again, I go back to the idea of what you're trying to what you're successfully beginning to implement is something that hasn't been done in this way before. And even in a centralizing environment of web to social media, they haven't figured it out, and they have the rule book. They have their own rule book, and they can't. The community and the rule book are at odds with one another, depending on the case,
Edge
the
cases are
scenario.
tough, man.
Yeah, yeah, they're tough. And then now with the search engine, that becomes even tougher because it's people's curiosity. How do you allow them to do in a decentralized manner while also protecting them from what they may or may not put up while they're searching? It's like, people are gonna take pre-search and make it into some sort of case study 100 years from now, and look at like how was Colin and all these other people trying to figure out, and at that time what was the climate, where were we at in society? So it's a big thing, and we can continue unpacking it for hours and hours and still not
Oh,
arrive at
totally.
any clear solution.
The
Yeah.
one thing that I will bring up, because I didn't touch on it, but I think it's pretty important, is that there isn't just one pre-search, and basically there's the ability to, and this is something that we're rolling out later this year, community search engines, which will basically be like an easy way to essentially fork pre-search, and
Mm.
to have in the first implementations, just your set of search providers and resources. The next one will be more of indexing and relevance and content rules and stuff. Like we have people say, oh hey, here's just a real easy one. One of the default providers, so we have like 100 different resources. Hey, I can select them, and then I type my query, and then I just click on the icon. Well, one of the ones that was most requested by community members was Pornhub, and so we had Pornhub as a default search provider. And then we had all these people saying, hey, we want to bring pre-search into schools. It's kind of a little problematic that
Sure.
Pornhub is one of the defaults. So we thought, okay, you know what, for now let's remove it. If people want to add it in, they can add it in as like their own custom provider. There's nothing stopping you from doing it, but we're not going to include it as a default. However, with this community search engine thing, there could be a pre-search for porn, man, and there could be all the different porn resources if people want to have them within that version of pre-search. And so it might have its own subdomain, or it might be like a subfolder, but you'll basically be able to go in there, stake tokens in order to like basically lead that. Like it's almost like on Reddit, a subreddit. It would be like a sub pre-search, and you could then go in and curate it to have your set of resources, your branding, your subfolder, and then you can go out and start marketing that to your audience, your community, and you'll be able to earn a percentage of the tokens that are generated by all the members who sign up through your system, and they will get as their defaults your defaults. And that's the way where then you can have almost like the republic model that the US is built on, where like, hey, if you want to do different things, then, go to Utah or go to, wherever, and it's different. And as long as it's all,
Right.
consensual, voluntary, not illegal per se, then,
Yeah.
you can go promote that. And it's a way to like, because ultimately, like in tech, one of the big things about governance and really like, it's like, well, what are the defaults? The default settings for all new users or all people that are joining the ecosystem, that's your governance. If you can have, though, multiple sets of defaults based on kind of how you came into the ecosystem, that enables a lot more freedom and flexibility. And so that's something that we're working on and thinking about.
So the code for PreSearch you mentioned will be completely open source, and anybody can fork it and create their own. So you're essentially opening up a can of worms for the
Absolutely.
internet. Yeah.
Yeah, right now it's not. It's there's community packages which are totally open source, and it's like an ability for anybody to come in and build like a knowledge panel and contribute it that goes onto the top of the PreSearch results. But ultimately, yeah, everything will be open source and forked,
Yeah.
and to start, get it off the ground, get that kind of network effect, and kind of traction, and then enable others to run with it.
Oh wow. Yeah. I mean the ripple effects code has, right? If you make it open source, how can you stop technology from advancing? And I pray that the legacy of what you're doing will be that like PreSearch is decentralized, but down the line it will be community governed. But what if the community doesn't know how to govern it, and God forbid they burn it to the ground? Well, you've already provided the infrastructure through open source code, so somebody else can rebuild it from the ground up.
Yep.
And ultimately, I think over time, as people become more conscious of their role in these tech companies, and they're really at the bottom, we're like cows on a farm waiting to be slaughtered for consumption, for some sort of other product. And we're not aware of it while we're grazing on the grass, right?
Yep.
I hope that this type of ethos, because ultimately people need to want it, will override sort of the centralizing gateways and gatekeepers of tech in general, because that's kind of what the internet was meant to provide. And then they just built all of these military silos on top of it that just keep all of the goodies in there once they figure out, how to perfect the product, which,
Yep.
it's just the way things work, but it shouldn't forever, because it can't,
That's right.
it's unsustainable.
Yep.
You can't really, because it's just everything centralizes at the top over time. And if we
Yep.
don't have a way, I don't want to say revolutionize, but it really is revolutionize the way you conduct financial stuff to begin with. And then it goes into a different thing. And then blockchain just has a million applications, more than we can even imagine right now.
Yep.
So with that being said, just two final questions. I want to touch really quickly on the nodes. Nodes are really important for blockchain in general. If you're trying to create a decentralized protocol, if you're trying to create a centralized one, I suppose not, because you could just centralize all the servers. Can you touch on, for people that don't know, I think I fall into this category as well. How do nodes, where can you just get the infrastructure for doing so? I hear a lot of, hot phrases like Raspberry Pis or this pie, and it just makes me think of pastries. Can you please explain how nodes are acquired? What is usually the cost? Real cost of procuring one. Do you have any idea of the energy implications on that when somebody puts it up in their house? And, where could somebody get one for Presearch or for any other protocol they want to support, whether that be Bitcoin or, Flux or whatever, Ergo.
Ergo. Yeah.
And I know you have to have a certain amount of skin in the game in order to do one for Presearch, but can you just kind of generally touch on some of those points with the nodes? 'Cause I think it's a lot less well understood than the miners at this point. Everybody understands proof of work mining and all that stuff. So, but nodes, not so much.
So yeah, it's essentially it's software based, so it doesn't need necessarily hardware, and
Okay.
anywhere that you can get a web server essentially. So any of the thousands and thousands of web hosting providers, if they support Docker, then they would support the Presearch Docker image. And so, we've got definitely, and we're trying to incentivize people to do the hardware devices, and this you can buy from a community member. Brad it made this one. There's a few community members that are making these actual hardware ones. If you want to plug a device in at your house and have it be just running on your home internet connection or your business internet connection, his thing is coinmonster.store. There's some other ones. If you go on to docs, docs.presearch.com, you can see some of the different hardware providers that are doing it. They're just doing it, totally independent. We really have nothing to do with it. We're just helping to spread the word about those who are doing it. But most of them are running, I would say, on either existing computers, laptops that are at home. Some people are actually running them on mobile devices. There's an Android hack that enables you to do it, and one of our community members, Anders, he's running them on his Android device. But a lot of them are being run on these virtual private servers. You can spin them up from any of these different providers. You could just Presearch, virtual private server host. People are doing it on regular cloud hosting as well, like AWS, and Oracle, I think, has one right now where you can do it. The cost generally is like $2 to $10 a month, I would say, for hosting if you're using a virtual private server. If it's running at home, honestly, it's negligible. You wouldn't notice the cost of it. There's no real energy because you're not doing proof of work as far as computationally intensive math calculations. The actual load on it is quite minimal, and because we have such a wide footprint at this point with 70,000 nodes, you would not notice it running on a computer or running on a Raspberry Pi, which is I think they're selling these for $200 or something, or $150. You could get your own Raspberry Pi for $50 and put it on there. So the actual costs are fairly minimal, and then you've got the cost of the pre, which is currently 2,000 pre, and it's around 8 cents, so about $150, $160, and you have that per each node. That's kind of the minimum that you would stake to a node, but you can stake more, and the way that the reward model works is that basically half is based on the performance of your node, and then half is based on the amount that you have staked. So it's like a multiplier that can be used to impact your reward earnings. So we have some people that are running 100 staked at 2,000 a piece, and there is actually an incentive to do that. We pay more rewards that way versus somebody who puts 200,000 pre on one node, but you don't have any of the management of running 100 nodes. You don't have the hosting costs of running 100 nodes. So there's a Telegram group, t.me/presearch nodes, or you can go to discord.presearch.com. There's people that are talking about that stuff all day long, and that's what they're trying to figure out. Was the best way to do it for rewards? Was the best way to do it for decentralization? So
I'm not sure if I touched on this circulating supply for pre-tokens right now. Do you have a number on that?
Yeah, on CMC and CoinGecko, it's around 400 million. It's a little over that now. It's probably around 440, 450 million out of
So
500 million.
out of 500. So how soon will you have to think of other incentives for node providers? That could be
It's
tricky.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I mean we've been thinking about and working on already. So I mean, we've got kind of some different innovative ways to again drive some pre back into the ecosystem. But then yeah, looking at shifting to alternative rewards as well. It's something
Yeah.
that's on the fairly near term horizon
That'd be really
for the
cool.
project.
I would
Mm-hmm.
recommend you, without understanding the intricacies of that, but kind of mining through a node indirectly for like ERG or things like that, sort of like a parallel asset type of
Mm.
thing would be really interesting.
Yep.
Um, yeah. Um, yeah, because it's tricky, right? You have a finite supply. You want to keep people with incentives that make sense. You're not
Mm-hmm.
mining directly, right? You're running a node, but you like with Flux's case, you have to keep those incentives up. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's different ways to approach it, but you can't have a halving cycle, right? Because there
Yep.
is none. You're not mining.
Yeah.
Parallel assets would be great. And if you do that, make ERG one of the first ones. I'm sure we would be happy to mutually benefit, like a symbiotic relationship. But
It it
yeah,
seems like a pretty cool project, man. I
yeah,
mean, again, I don't know the details and yeah, but looking at your Twitter feed and seeing like your ideals made me like stoked to talk to you. And then from what I do know about the project, it seems like a pretty cool one. So I'm gonna do more research on it, and yeah, definitely keep me informed, man.
yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, yeah. So with that being said, one final question. It'll be a two-part final question. Um, what are the major milestones still on your roadmap to achieve apart from the things we talked about? And what is needed, do you feel, as a tipping point, or what will serve as the catalyst for, pre-search being not being a kind of fringe search engine for most mainstream consumers, right? Everyday people. So what will be that tipping point where you could say, you know, we're able to successfully be a household name,
Mm-hmm.
and people can understand the concept. I mean, I think it's pretty simple to explain, but understand, being more data conscious in the future and things like that. I know a lot of variables are outside of your control in order to make pre-search a household name, because it's ultimately a consumer driven. They must want to care about their data.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so milestones and what will it take for pre-search to be up there with Mozilla, with Google Chrome, with Explorer, you know.
Yeah, so I think kind of it's an interesting time in that the past let's say since 2016, but then more specifically since 2020 and COVID, there's been a whole pretty significant demographic of people who've been like having their realities broken basically, and they're looking at alternatives, and they're trying to get away from big tech. They're trying to get away from the current powers that be, and I think that's kind of the target audience. And even though it's you know um, a fragment of the overall population, it's a pretty big one. It's like, we're talking probably half the population cares about some of these things. And that's why like DuckDuckGo, for instance, has seen massive growth over the past couple of years. And people have been shifting into, more private alternatives. And, the thing is, and like DuckDuckGo has now had some pushback over the past couple months because some of the statements that they've made, and people have been like, oh, well, I thought DuckDuckGo was on our side. And it's like, man, DuckDuckGo is funded by Union Square Ventures. Look them up. And oh, yeah, the biggest financial backer of DuckDuckGo is OMERS, which is the Ontario Municipal Employee Retirement System pension fund. It's one of the biggest pension funds in the world. It's for the state or province where I am. And, you know,
Oh
they put
wow.
like tens of millions into DuckDuckGo. And so, like, all these alternatives are really not alternatives. They're just, you know, kind of like skins on other things. And so I think, you know, like from a technical and product standpoint, like we need to be as easily ubiquitous as the others. So like, you know, the ease for somebody just to switch to Presearch as their default search engine and access it through all their different web browsers, whether it's, you know, Chrome and Firefox and Brave, which are all easy, to more challenging ones like Safari on an iOS device. Like you can't just easily switch to that, and that's why we've got, you know, a mobile app that you use on iOS. But trying to like have that ubiquitous access, um, making sure that ultimately the brand stays aligned with that huge community and opportunity for adoption, and doesn't go down the same path as you know, DuckDuckGo and others have gone, is going to be, I think, really key. And then just making the user experience as you know, high quality as possible. So like on the roadmap, like some of like the short term stuff, like, you know, what is Presearch missing right now? It's missing like a good autocomplete, you know, where you just start typing and it gives you your search suggestions. That's probably like the number one thing that it's missing. And then, you know, at the current state, because it's accessing resources from all these other platforms, there is, you know, a little bit of a speed difference. And, you know, for most people, it's actually pretty minimal. And there are ways through the UI that you can make it, you know, pretty comparable, where it feels just as fast as like a Google or a DuckDuckGo. But you know, those are kind of some of the short term things, and then longer term, it's, you know, decentralized index and all the things that are
Right.
required there. Building out this community search engine platform to enable multiple, you know, different versions of Presearch that are all, you know, using the same advertising platform, which is, you know, giving us a go to market strategy as well as providing kind of that freedom of choice, while then also bringing value to the token through, you know, more eyeballs on ads. That's, you know, a really big development. And then ultimately, you know, governance and enabling community members to participate more actively in the code side and the development of the platform. Because you know, Google, even though, like, you know, they got 100,000 employees, there's probably, we figure, like less than 10,000 that actually work on search. Most of them are working on other things. And so, you know,
Right.
and ultimately, like, could we attract 10,000 developers to Presearch? I think we
Probably.
could, right? And
Yeah.
that's how you can,
Eventually,
like,
yeah.
right. And so, like, you know, some of the tools, like in the meantime, like shorter term, you know, this community package system, which is actually quite robust. We just need to do more like marketing of what can be done there, and put more incentives for people, put out bounties and things. And then kind of, you know, shorter term, and especially depending on if this turns out to be like a real bear market or not, and how much we need to focus on sustainability and those kinds of things, then, you know, we shift a little bit more focus to the advertising platform and some of the alternative reward models. Those types of things kind of become you know, higher priority. And that's kind of what we're planning for right now, because we don't really know what's happening with this overall you know, market. But, you know, my guess is not that this is a bluff, all this like interest rate pumping, but there have been two or three other times in you know, semi recent history, let's call it the past, you know, 30, 40 years, where they've like jacked up rates and then immediately dropped rates. And I think that's actually what's going to happen, because I think they're going to implode the economy if they just keep jacking rates up. And I think that when they drop them back down, and I think we're going to see a huge shot of liquidity into the system, and we're going to see a crack up boom. I think that the interest in inflation hedges and in crypto as an inflation hedge is going to surge like crazy. And then if we can get, like, people denominating things in bits and, focusing more on the actual mission, I think, crypto might not go into this like prolonged winter of despair that some people are calling for right now. So anyways, that overall has impacts on what we prioritize within the roadmap.
Right. Well, you couldn't have picked a better time to begin developing on pre-search at the time. 2018, around there. You couldn't have anticipated what would have come out of that. It feels like that out of great tragedy comes great opportunity as well, and people also they might be emboldened by some of the ethics of your vision, just due to out of the negatives of COVID. Just say, hey, look at all the things that are going on. Spend more time with technology than ever before. Reanalyze who has power where, and just have kind of like a very weird 2 years of contemplation as well, existential dread as well. Like there's pros out of every negative, and negatives out of every pro, right? So
polarizing events.
Yes, and then censorship and things like that. You pick the right time and the right previous president to help to incubate a lot of the case studies of how people view the relationship to Web2 companies and things like that. So, I think it's becoming more relevant what you guys are doing. And, with that being said, I want to thank you for your time. 2.5 hours. Congratulations. You got the little record on the channel so far.
As do you for me. So this was a good one.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I'm going to put a few of the links that you mentioned. Do you mind repeating them so I can kind of have a verbal cue? Where can people get more involved with PRESEARCH if they choose to?
Yep. So presearch.com if they want to start using the engine, presearch.io if they're looking just for more information on the project, Telegram t.me/presearch. If they're looking to spin up a node on Telegram, t.me/presearch nodes. And then we have Discord, which is discord.presearch.com. And then finally, probably best social presence right now is on Twitter, twitter.com/presearch news.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Colin. And I'm looking forward to seeing how PRESEARCH evolutionizes and revolutionizes in the future. The way we interact with our technology, just search engines in general, that's a huge one. So thank you so much for doing what you do. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, you too, Anthony. Appreciate it, man. Definitely stay in touch and keep up the great work too, man. It's awesome to do these deep dives. This is fun.
In a bear market, no less, right? Now's the time to have these discussions away from token price, especially. So
that's right.
Like I told you, out of every negative situation, there's positives.
True, man. Absolutely. Silver lining.
Thank you so much. See ya.
Have a good one. See ya.